So, can everybody hear me without the microphone?
Yes.
Easily? Okay, so we'll forget the microphone. Alright, so my name is Enray Toker, Enray like X-ray, instead of X with an M, that'll be close enough to my name. And the email address is toker@bristol.edu. Feel free to shoot me emails anytime that you want to. So this is going to be a series of workshops. This is the first one, and I thank you very much for coming out. I'll do my best to make it an interesting workshop for you. So typically, an agenda would start off with me telling you who am I, and then maybe we talk about some philosophical things about why we're here. But having begun to understand the nature of Missouri, the Show Me State, and the students of Washington University, the Show Me students, I'm going to jump straight to where will we be by the end of these workshops, these series of workshops. And then I'll come back to who am I and why are we here and so on, which are important and relevant. But let's start with the real stuff as to where you will be by the end of these workshops. And then the topic was a reality check. So everything that I say will have an umbrella over it about the reality check about the things that we're talking about. Okay? So I'm going to go out on an edge here, and I'm going to make a fairly big promise, but I'm not just making it by pulling it off of the skies. I've been doing this for a while, giving workshops on technology commercialization. Typically I do it for scientists and engineers, but people who have zero knowledge of business. And so the promise that I'm making you is, even if you have zero background in business, by the end of this series of workshops, you're going to feel extremely comfortable about the idea of business and of thinking about a startup and how you would approach it. And that's not assuming that you will do the 30-hour-a-week homework assignments either. If you're interested, you could do some homework assignments. That'd be great. I'll give you lots of tools to do so. Now let me get a feel for who's in the audience. Who is a student here of any kind? Okay, faculty, staff? Okay. From the community in general? Okay, quite a few. Related somehow to medicine? Okay, very few. Related to social work, nonprofit, NGO? Okay, several. Okay. Great, but I'm going to assume that you have zero background in business, and I think that's a good enough place to start, even if you do have some background in business. So the base assumption is the following. This is another big assertion that I'm making that many people would debate, but in my experience, you can turn in an 80-page business plan which gives you lots of places to hide. The place where you don't find any place to hide is numbers. And everything can be eventually explained by numbers with the exception of this thing called execution risk. So we can quantify lots of things about a business, and when we quantify them, that leaves the founder of a new enterprise no place to hide. And this is what I will be describing to you quite a bit during these workshops. It'll become clearer and clearer as I talk about it. But this is one of the fundamental beliefs behind this operation. I told you that I would talk about myself later on, but part of what I'm talking about is all directly related and comes from my personal experiences. So I've never taken a business class in my life. Yet I formed 3 medical device companies. I bootstrapped the medical device companies. 2 of them were acquired by a public company in Canada. 1 of them was acquired by an Irish investment bank. So for those of you who don't know anything about business, I didn't know anything about business either. But luckily, business happens to be mostly common sense. Yes, ma'am?
What does bootstrap mean?
Bootstrap means you use your own money and you do not go out and get angel investment money or venture capital money. You do get some grants if you can, from anybody that you can get grants from, but you use your cash flow to grow your company up to the level that you want it to grow it. And I'll get into the details of that in a few minutes. And please do exactly what this lady did, which is if you don't understand some of the terminology, please stop me and ask. So we're all at the same level here as far as our prior experiences are concerned. Now I'm going to show you 3 levels of worksheets and workbooks. And please do not be discouraged by the apparent complexity of these, because all I want to do is to show you where will we be by the end of these workshops, okay? And so I will show you the most complex one first, then a complexity, intermediate complexity, and the simplest one. And the only way for us to get a sense as to what I'm talking about is to open one up and take a look at it. So by the end of this workshop, what I would like to have happen is that all of you will be able to completely understand and completely fill in these numbers, and you will be able to completely understand everything else that's going on here in the back end of these numerical calculations that we're doing. Okay, but let's start with the basic stuff first. The very first thing that we need to do is, do you understand the terminology that we're using here? For example, I have over here on our left side, terminology like total available market, annual market growth rate, served available market, something called a churn rate, something called cost of customer acquisition, cost of goods sold, etc., etc. So if you don't know what these even mean, then we do not yet have a place to start from. So the very first thing that we're going to do is to understand what the terminology of business involves. Step number 1. Once we understand what these terms mean, the next thing is to fill in your assumptions for your own venture as to what numbers are going to take place. So this is an exercise at trying to predict the future. The future is going to eventually reveal itself to us, and there will be no questioning it. But right now we have this terrible task of guessing as to what will happen in the next year, second year, third year, fourth year, after we launch our business. So we fill in these numbers, and they may be completely out there, have no relevance to reality. So what is the tool that we have to bring us back to reality? Luckily, there's lots of companies who have either succeeded or survived for 3 years, and those that that are onto a similar business like yours, like an e-commerce company, or a non-profit, or a medical device company. So we have a database of actual numbers when reality presented itself. We have a database of numbers that we can compare the numbers that you're guessing at to reality, and then say, okay, you're saying that you're going to generate, let's say, more revenue per employee than Google. Google generates about $1.5 million of revenue per employee annually. So if you say 2 million, well, we're going to say to you, could you please explain to me how you're going to be even better than Google at this thing? So that's step number 2. We're going to guess at these numbers, then we're going to refine them by looking at benchmarks and being able to negotiate with somebody who's done this before and has seen many of these about what's real, what's not real. The third step that we're going to use this in is, as I said, we're projecting future. Nobody can do that. None of us are prophets. But reality will dictate itself every year. So what we do is, we ask you to fill in these numbers, then we use this as a tool to monitor our portfolio companies. A portfolio company is a company that investors have invested in and now want to see how the company is doing. So what we say is, okay, when year one is over, replace your assumptions by reality, and then reforecast the numbers out for the subsequent years based on what reality showed you in year number one. So this is kind of the engineering approach to the assessment of a startup company and the monitoring of a startup company. All of these tabs down here are designed to do what I used to call sanity checks, like this is an exit sanity check. Exit means the possibility of selling the company to somebody else. Monetization sanity check, revenue growth sanity check, economies of scale sanity check, etc., etc. So these are all sanity checks. And what they also allow us to do is what-if scenarios. So the way this Excel is designed is you can change just a single cell and the entire system will recalculate everything else from scratch. So what does this enable us to do? It enables us to do this thing called what-if scenarios. So for example, this is from one of my student meetings from my days at the University of Arizona. Please, again, don't get discouraged if you're not understanding any of this, because this is, again, where we will be at the end of this series of workshops. Not today, at the end of the series of workshops. So, let's pick a simple one. Sales cycle in months, and then this mysterious thing called deepest cash hole. So, sales cycle means the following. Suppose I want to sell something to Washington University. I have some new gadget that I want to sell to Washington University, a new presentation system. Well, I'll go to Washington University, they'll form a committee, they'll study it for 6 months, and then they'll put it out for bids, they'll get the bids, they'll study the bids. It's going to take 18 months from the time that I make first contact to the time that I get to sell them something. The longer that time is, the more in danger I am of having my company collapse. So that's called the sales cycle. And the y-axis on this graph over here is the amount of money that I need to survive and get to a point where my company can take off. Now, I don't know whether Washington University will take 6 months, 4 months, 8 months, 18 months. So I use this tool to tell myself and to tell my investors, Mr. Investor, if it takes 6 months, we need $300,000, but if it happens to take 8 months, it will take $332,000. So the tool is also useful to provide a rational platform for investors, donors in the case of nonprofits, and the founders to have a rational conversation. Imagine two scenarios. In one case, the founder said, sales cycle is going to be 6 months and we need $300,000, Mr. Investor. And the investor says, okay, here's your $3,000. Time passes, we go back to the investor and say, so sorry, Washington University, you know how they are. They have a committee and we can't close the sale, we need more money. If you're an investor, you're going to be a little bit upset. Scenario number 2, Mr. Investor, remember our discussion when we showed you through a tool how much money we would need as a function of the sales cycle? Well, you and I both agreed 6 months seemed like a reasonable amount of time. And we did understand that there was a possibility that it could take 8 months. That's exactly what happened. It took 8 months. So we're trying to bring rationality and, engineering thinking, rational thinking into the field of entrepreneurship through tools of this type. So that is the most complex tool. Let me tell you how I use this tool in real life. So I've been an angel investor in Tucson, Arizona. I'll define angel investor in 2 seconds. For the last 14 years or so. And every year I see approximately 400 applications for investment. It is impossible for me to analyze all 400, and nor for my colleagues. So we decided that we need a semi-automated tool to make it easy for us to assess these companies. So this was the outcome of a problem that we faced, something quantitative that would enable us to give semi-automated assessment tool, but more so a platform for conversation, for principled conversation between founders and startups. And the back end, the database that I'm talking about of performance of successful companies, that exists, except that it's not readily available. Venture capital companies have their own data that they do not prefer to share with others. Angel investors have their own data that they're more willing to share with others, but there is no centralized database. So this database is the database that's in my head about all the companies that I've seen. Yes, ma'am?
Are we going to have access to that?
Of course. You'll have access to everything that I'm showing you completely. Yeah. That's why I mentioned, the homework assignments if you want to do this. Now, if I were you, I wouldn't start with this one. I would even start with the next one that I'm going to show you. But I would start with the simplest one. So, again, please keep in mind, where are we going to be at the end of this workshop series? Not today. So, we're going to start from a blank piece of paper and assume that we have a founder who has zero knowledge of business or business terms, and we're going to develop from scratch a complete rational financial projections, which, as I said, in my opinion, forms the basis of the description of a new company. So what we will do is we will build an architecture that will be completely internally consistent. And we will try to minimize the number of assumptions that we have, hopefully down to one. Everything else will be either through market research or through calculations. We hate assumptions because that's what will get us. And the one assumption that we have very little control over is this thing called market share, which translates into how many units are we going to be able to sell. All of us are guessing when it comes to that, market share. So there are examples of this. This is meant to be the so-called venture capital hockey stick. So this is a hockey stick. And the venture capital hockey stick means the expectation is that startups will come out and will kind of drag along the bottom for a while, and then they'll reach this point called the inflection point, and then the company is going to explode. But my point here is that imagine BlackBerry. So BlackBerry had the entire building set up. There is no question about it. They had their sales networks, they had their vendors, they had their VP of technology, engineers, everything else. As soon as you took market share out from under them, what happened to BlackBerry? The danger of collapsing completely. Well, what happened to BlackBerry up there completely applies to startups who are right here. We are all reliant on market share. So I won't take time too much with this, but so my area was medical imaging, specifically mammography, and then devices for particular ailments associated with breast cancer. So what I'm going to walk you through during these workshops, and then each of you is going to be asked to do exactly the same thing for your venture concept. This is completely independent of medical device. It could be any business here. And they, as I said, they will either be market research or a calculation, and the only assumption that we're going to make is about the share of the market, which will enable us to do the sensitivity analysis that I was talking to you about. So there is an element of strategy built into this tool. By strategy, I mean the following. So I'm going to sell something to mammography centers, mammography biopsy centers. If I can't succeed in my backyard in Arizona, why bother? I don't have to attack, the entire US or China and Europe and so on and so forth. First, let me show you that I can capture and sell something, do something in my own backyard. So the served available market in year number 2, year number 1 is, I'm assuming, is development. In year number 2, there is 133 biopsy centers, and if I don't succeed there, I'll stop. No need to waste anybody's money or my own time as a founder. So built into this is a certain level of strategy as to the areas that we will choose to fight in. We can't just conquer the world the next day, right? So we have to define our battlefields, and then we'll fight our battles step by step. Yes, sir?
What if your own backyard is not necessarily
Right.
most conducive
Very good.
place to?
Very good. Good question. So, for example, projects that involve social media or things that need a critical mass in order to get started, where you don't have a geographical restriction. There, my question to you would change slightly, which would be, what is the lowest hanging fruit for you? Which customers are most likely to say, boy, I'd love to buy this. Doesn't matter if they're in New York, Florida, or Seattle. So no geographical limitation. So I would force you to think about who's the lowest hanging fruit that I should go after first. Because if I can't win there, I might as well give up. Quickly coming to you. So for example, let's say you had a venture that involved social media. If you can't show me traction at Washington University, where you're a student and everybody knows you and you have access, give it up. You're not going to be able to do it. I, as an investor, want you to show me that you can at least succeed in your backyard or with the lowest hanging fruit. Yes, sir?
So wouldn't you say that one way to think about this is where are the thought leaders in your specific
Sure,
market
sure.
that are going to align with what your concept is?
Exactly.
Find them. We're not really talking about geography.
Right, right. So it's the, and even I would go broader than that. Who's the lowest hanging fruit? Who's the best match? These guys, if these guys don't buy it, why bother? Right? Show me that first. In my case, it happened to be geography. But the principle, the concept behind it is the lowest hanging fruit concept. Now, as you can see here, I have in blue the assumption, which I can change, and Excel will recalculate everything that you will see as I go down. Again, I don't want to dwell on it too much. A price that has nothing to do with cost. Price is the amount that the consumer is willing to pay and not calculated from cost. Hopefully it's higher than cost, obviously, otherwise we will go belly up. But, you know, I see this mistake about, well, it cost me $50 to make, so I better sell it for $100. No. You will sell it for as much as the market values it. I wish I had the slide. I don't have it here, but you can check it if you like. My first product cost me, honestly, I know this is so outrageous that you're going to think I'm lying to you. My product cost $15, and it's still being sold for $2,375. So no correlation between the cost of a product and the value of a product. Yes, sir?
Can I ask what all went into your cost of goods sold for that?
So it was a machine part made of plastic. That was it. A machine plastic, and the use of it was for quality control of digital mammography systems. So the value was very high, clinical value was very high, and nobody cared how much it cost. The price was determined by the value.
Did you include your labor in that?
Yeah.
Cost as well?
Okay, so you know, I'm trying to establish my hockey stick. So I have my cost of goods sold. Good question. You know, materials, labor, possibly other. Now, how are these determined? Hold on one second. How are these determined? So, what I want to see, open parentheses. My students used to call me, and I know some of you are sick of hearing this, or have heard this, 50 times before. My students used to call me mentor and tormentor, because I would torment them as heavily as I could, because without breaking their energy and without discouraging them. So as a teacher of entrepreneurship, that's the balance that you have to walk. Reality without discouraging. And I'll come back to that in a second. So, how is that related to here? Materials, $2,000. Show me 3 quotations from 3 manufacturers with competitive bids as to exactly what you want to have built. That's where the $2,000 comes from. Number of hours multiplied by dollar per hour for the laborers, the quality of the laborer, some benchmarks against how much are these laborers being paid elsewhere, and so on and so forth. So it looks very easy and simple on the surface, but if you have a tormentor, then the product will become of higher and higher quality. Again, with respect to tormenting, how many engineers will you have in year 3? How many sales and marketing people will you have in year number 2? You can make those numbers up, but there's a metric, a benchmark. For example, all the way from GE Medical Systems with thousands and thousands of employees to my tiny little 20-employee medical device company, the average revenue per employee for a medical device company is about $350,000. You can't, there's very few companies that have gone up to 600 and few that could survive, made 100 and survive. So if you're projecting revenues of 4 million, I ask you, how many employees are you projecting in that year? How many of them are in engineering? How many in sales, and so on and so forth? So this internal consistency as well as consistency with benchmarks is very important to us. So software companies, 500,000. Craigslist, 2 million. Google, 1.5 million, etc., etc. So benchmarking against existing successful companies is critical. So I won't get into this one, but all the possible expenses that a startup will incur is thought through, but then prioritized from the highest expense to the lowest expense. So when we ask people who form companies, how much will you spend in marketing? They will come up with a number. And you ask them, how did you come up with this number? Occasionally, they're unable to explain. It just made sense. But there is a concept of cost of customer acquisition. Customers are bought. You have to pay to buy customers. And again, these numbers are well known. Amazon today spends about $40 to buy a customer. So if you take their marketing expenses, divided by the number of new customers they generated for themselves, it's approximately $40 today. So what's Amazon thinking? Amazon is saying to itself, I'll pay $40 to buy this gentleman as a customer, but I know historically, statistically, that he will come back to Amazon and buy, 6 books, 7 books, 10 books, and each time I'll make $10 of profit off of him. So this concept of lifetime value of the customer, the summation of all the profits that I will make from that person that I bought as a customer exceeds, lifetime value is at least 5 times greater than the cost of customer acquisition, go. So those are the type of calculations that go into consideration as we decide what's a reasonable amount of money to spend on cost of customer acquisition. So now, when we go through this entire calculation, we end up with a very simple 5-year projection that any investor wants to see. There is no investor that will invest in you or a donor that will give you money without seeing some financial projections. And now what we have done, forget the stuff below here under the pre-money for a second. What we have done now is created some numbers, all of which are defensible by the calculations or the market research that we did up above. So if I ask you any question, how did you come up with $303,000, you can refer back up and again have a reasonable conversation with the party that's sitting opposite from you. For-profit companies, and I'm going to need some help, from the social enterprise folks here, because my background is from the for-profit industry, and I'm still learning the terminology and the language of nonprofits. Fundamentals are the same, sustainability and scalability, but words matter. But in a for-profit operation, the investor is going to put some money into the company with the expectation that he will get some money back out. And there is some risk associated that the entire money is going to be lost. So the type of calculations that are going through the investor's mind can also be captured in this type of calculus. And we'll take a deep dive into each of these as we go down the workshop.
Sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
When you look at benchmarking for your medical device company compared to Medtronic, would you say the scale is the same, that Medtronic would have the same cost per?
No, I think in terms of, the only metric that probably would apply is revenue per employee.
Okay.
That seems to be consistent from very large companies to very small companies. For all other metrics, we use, as I mentioned, startups in the same area that have survived for 3 years, 4 years.
By
Those are our
sales
more relevant metrics. Yeah. So this is level number 2 that we're going to get to yesterday.
As you mentioned, you referred to the price, so how do you calculate the price if you said that
Yeah.
the customer is
Yeah.
for your product?
So what you have to do is the following question. All the questions are simple. The answers are tough. What is the customer's next best alternative to what I'm offering? The customer always has his next best alternative to what you're offering. And how much is he paying for that today? And what is he getting for that today? Now you come and you already know what the customer's next best alternative is. And now you have to provide adequately enough value to justify your price. So the product that I mentioned, the mammography product, the customer's next best alternative to mine was a gold vacuum deposition, technical term, but a very expensive product to do quality control with. And it was, I don't remember now, maybe $7,000. So knowing that, I said, $2,759.99.
So, I mean, that's the question. So if you know that $7,000 was the next best product, how did you come on the number of 2,300?
Yeah.
You could say $6,000.
Yeah. Okay, so this is also very difficult answer to come up with. So the tricks that are usually played are based on the following. One of them is like, this week only, or you're such a special customer that I'm going to give you at a big discount. So always putting the price very, very high and then finding excuses to lower them for certain circumstances to test the acceptance of the marketplace to the price. Yeah. The other trick might be, maybe I'll use this analogy. If I said, tomorrow, I don't know if this analogy will work, but let's give it a shot. Tomorrow I'm going to give away, free Mercedes-Benzes, but I'll only give 3 away, right, or 2 away. The night before there will be a line of, 100,000 people waiting outside. Now if I say I'm going to sell 2 Mercedes-Benzes at $25,000, the line is going to get a little bit shorter. So testing the market for what price tolerance they have. Yeah. So this one is also relatively complex. Yes, ma'am? No question. Okay. Now let's go to the first one. Hold on 2 seconds. Okay. So this one is my starting point. Let me have your question and then I'll jump. Thanks.
Your payroll taxes, are those built into your cost of goods sold?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I saw that on.
Right. So payroll taxes for hourly workers is built into the cost of goods sold. Payroll taxes for salesmen and engineers and so on and so forth are separate.
I see.
Yeah. Okay. So I did this, initially I thought I'll do this for like freshmen who come into the university and have absolutely zero knowledge. And then I started testing it with, honestly, I hope there's no tenured professors, with tenured professors, and to my big surprise, even tenured professors were really getting into it. And so let me describe to you what it is, and then we can decide whether you like it or not. So what this system does is, first, I think I'll zoom to this level. Okay. The first objective is to use layman language, very, very simple language, not business language. So for example, let's read the second one. it's verbose, but at least it's simple language. So what it says is, number of customers in your 5-year target market with this pain that you're trying to solve, this customer pain, who might be willing to pay for your solution when they presumably already have many other alternatives to resolve this pain. And the answers are carefully selected to be simple. Millions and millions, hundreds of thousands. Thousands will always be a small niche. So we go through these questions, very non-threatening questions, but the objective is in step 2 and step 3, we'll be asking, what is your target market size? Not just millions of millions, but 3,500,000 in the US. And then there's a plus or minus uncertainty associated with it. And we will slowly, over time, as we take a deeper and deeper dive, we will reduce that uncertainty. This is a process of starting off with large uncertainties and then diminishing the uncertainties. And this is our first starting point. So I ask a series of questions of this type. So, these are actually, believe it or not, important questions that we ask everybody. So, except that they're kind of hidden. So it says, how easy would it be for other knowledgeable people or companies to copy your venture concept, particularly if you start showing some success in the marketplace? This is how companies die. Actually, we're asking, are you aware of this? You can die because of this. But the answers we give is quite simple. Extremely difficult, relatively easy, extremely easy, etc. Pick one. And then we're going to take a deep dive into it. So the reason why students and then faculty eventually responded so positively to this was, at the end, I have this, how good is my venture concept? You have a 29%. Now the number is not important at all. It's the conversation that's important. But what was pleasantly shocking was these tenured professors were saying to each other, I got the highest one, 83, except, but you exaggerated that third question and so on and so forth. So it really turned out to be a fantastic opportunity. So depending on where we are at the end of the day today, I'll ask for a volunteer, maybe more than one volunteer with a concept. And then we'll run them through this, and I'll challenge the answers that they're giving. I'll get into my tormentor mode. And what is it good for? It's good for relative assessment and to ask the tough questions that will get much more specific over time if you decide to go ahead with the project. Okay? So, terminology, the right questions to ask, the answers that have been benchmarked by existing successful companies. That's really pretty much all it takes to give a good package. Now I'm going to roll back to some intangibles. Who watches Shark Tank here? Okay, many of you do. So, in Shark Tank they say, I'm willing to give a third of my company for $50,000. So that, for professional investors, the terminology that we use is something called pre-money valuation. Pre-money, pre is for before the investment. So he says to me, I want $50,000 of investment from you. And I ask him, what do you think the value of your company is today before I invest? And he says, $1 million. And I say, how did you come up with that number? And then we start getting into a conversation, right? So what this system does is, it will assign a pre-money valuation, a value for the company, that $497,000 there, based on the numerical information that you gave us, and after we went through and validated it and benchmarked it against other companies. What is it not taking into account? What is impossible to quantify?
Market share.
Market share, exactly, but we will do a sensitivity analysis on market share. The thing that we cannot quantify is the execution team. In other words, let's say that you gave me the exact same numbers. He said, this is my first rodeo, and you said, I've already sold 5 companies. I built and sold 5 companies. We will give you a higher valuation, which means we'll take a smaller portion of your company. Why? Because risk is lower in your case as compared to him. What type of risk is it? It's execution risk. So this is a floor that we say, if Joe Schmo came from the street and said, you know, I have this company thought, and here are my numbers. Okay, if you're just, you know, Joe Smith off the street, your valuation is this. Now convince us that you deserve a higher valuation because you can decrease execution risk. Okay? So now let me roll back to a little bit of relevant philosophy and a little bit of relevant information about who I am. So I'm going to come back to who I am and why are we here, and reality check in 2 seconds. Okay. So I'd like to introduce myself being an engineer through a graph. So the graph is x-axis, wealth of countries, the richness of countries. So United States, Norway, Hong Kong, Sweden are on this side of the fence. The interesting axis is the y-axis, which is percentage of the population engaged in early stage entrepreneurship. Percentage of the population engaged in entrepreneurship. So, what do we see here? The poorer the country, the more people are engaged in entrepreneurship. There is no other way. If there is no job and you have to put food on the table, you're going to go and do whatever it takes, which is entrepreneurship, to put food on the table, right? This side is the technology play. Anybody from Greece? Nobody's from Greece. And in the middle is Greece, where, you know, not too poor, not starving, and not that much technology, so kind of like sitting there waiting. It's just a joke about the Greeks, because I'm Turkish myself. So I was born on this side of the fence, and without any question at all, I said this in many other forums, 80 to 90% of what I learned about entrepreneurship, I absolutely and definitely learned on this side of the fence. And then I was thrown over to this side of the fence, to technology, but I relied on what I learned on that other side to be partially, I can explain what I was able to achieve, partially on the fact that I was born on that side and spent my first 18 years on that side. I'll elaborate on that a little bit more. Now, as the economy gets tighter and tighter and tighter, I think we will be pushed in gentler ways. You're not going to be selling, you know, tomatoes and eggs off of a cart, but you will have to think entrepreneurially. My wife's dad worked for only one company her entire life. Got out of the Navy, joined MIT Lincoln Labs, worked his entire life at MIT Lincoln Labs, and retired. You will change jobs many, 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 many times, and you have to be entrepreneurial, and you have to grab opportunities when they present them to you, this type of thing. So this gap, this bridging. So, those of you, who are WashU students, who I see most regularly and I'm beginning to understand, there is no question that you're very book smart, you have a lot of analytical intelligence, but that is only half the game. So the game that I play is, who here plays chess, great chess, or reasonable chess? Okay, a few hands got up. Of those who raise their hands, who also plays poker quite well. And now those are the guys who should think about entrepreneurship. And the reason is obvious. Chess is strategy, thinking 4 steps ahead. Poker is winning with a weak hand. And having lived this, I competed with GE Medical Systems. I couldn't have won at chess with GE. All I could win at was poker. So I selected my battlefield extremely carefully, where I would fight with GE, something that was below their radar. And that's where I employed, the street smarts and the poker and so on and so forth. Now, street smarts is also incredibly, incredibly important. I'll give you by an example. Again, usually I target these at students and typically at students studying science. So there's a program called the Small Business Innovation Research. So the federal government will give you lots of money to work on something that's really futuristic, okay? For example, the National Institutes of Health will give you $1 million if you're working on a really out there idea. Except that they will only fund research. So they will give you no money for marketing, no money for rent. So how am I going to survive with the company? So my approach was using street smartness. I would only apply for grant applications where I would propose a complex system, okay, one that had a chance of getting funded by the government. In it, I would put a component that was necessary for the operation of the whole system, but one that was quite easy to design and put into the marketplace. If it did not have that component, I would not apply for that grant application. So my whole objective was, government, give me the $1 million, and the very first thing I'll do is build a component that I indicated to you. I'm not cheating you, the component is necessary, but my first money is going to go to the component that I can sell right away, so that I can get myself some breathing space for marketing and for living and so on and so forth. So street smarts, though, is much, much more than this. I used to tell my wife that 90% of what I did was psychology at our startups, and 10% was everything else. Psychology with customers, with vendors, with employees. You have to be able to look at a person in the eye and get a sense as to what he's thinking. If you're boring the heck out of the customer, you're not going to be a very successful entrepreneur. If you don't understand that you're boring the customer, get out of the game. It's not your game. Be a professor. So, this is very important too. Now, this one, these are very easy words to say, but difficult to live. You can have all of this and only a little bit of this, it's not going to work. You can have all the passion in the world, but not have this cold, analytical ability to say, my baby's ugly, baby being the venture concept, and drop it and pick up another baby, you're not going to succeed. So it's this combination of very contradictory things, like self-confidence and humility. You have to have supreme self-confidence, but you can't come off as arrogant. You have to exercise humility. Passion is necessary. Human psychology, the courage to fail. Knowing what you do not know is also incredibly critical. You know some things, you don't know some other things. Accept it, you'll be a successful entrepreneur. I think, I'm really puzzled by this, right? So the hit rate from the time that a company applies to us for investment to becoming a successful company is 6 over 1,000. Why is it so incredibly small? The reason I really believe is because very, very few people have these traits inherent in themselves or are able to come up with a team that combine these traits together. So the challenge, I joined Washington University, again, knowing what you don't know. I think I can teach this side fairly well. I am not at all sure, I'm still discussing with people, whether this side is even teachable. This stuff is soft stuff. A vast majority of technology startups in the US are started either by immigrants or the children of immigrants. This chart explains that a little bit, because I, as an immigrant, know how much I wanted to, fit in and be successful, and I had nothing to lose whatsoever, so failure, not only was it an option, but, and the next best alternative was to start a company. So that type of combination of traits is really critical. So, not to discourage, but to face reality is the name of the game. Any of you thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, I absolutely positively do not want to do anything like discourage you, but at the same time I want you to face reality as it is. These are the numbers for all organized angel investment groups in the United States, normalized to 100. So we get 100 new applications for investment. We call 14 of them to our screening committee where, somebody comes up and shows us their PowerPoints. And then we say to 9 of them, of the top 100, you're interesting enough, why don't you come to our dinner meeting and we'll listen to you. Of those, 6 to 7 of them we'll put under due diligence. We'll take a much more careful look at what they're about. We'll invest in 3, and of those, 6 out of 1,000 are going to be successful. In the context of commercial startups, the arbitrary definition of success is for investors to get 5 times their original investment. Arbitrary definition, but some definition of success in some way. So if the odds are so small, why is anybody an angel investor? It would be a stupid thing to do. But if we look at the statistics, again, all angel investors in the country, averaged out, have made 2.6 times their original total investment over a period of 3.5 years. So it's a good business to be an angel investor. And that is based on the so-called, portfolio theory, meaning 50% of our investments, after we make an investment, collapse. 0. We lose all the money. Despite that, we're making this kind of profit. Why? Because the few winners are giving us enormous returns. Now remember the curve that I showed you, which was, in the poor countries, people having to go into entrepreneurship. Now that guy selling tomatoes off the cart cannot play the portfolio game, right? Either the kids are going to go hungry, or I'm going to make money out of this, and I'll do whatever it takes, over, above, under, I'm going to accomplish this, otherwise the child is going to go hungry today. So the thing that has irritated me, all the way from the start is, in no other part of my life do I accept a 50% failure rate. And here you're telling me, this is the way it is, portfolio theory, 50% are going to fail, just make 20 investments and hopefully there'll be a Facebook in it. So that's contrary to my thinking. And so I keep challenging my colleagues, why are we this bad? And the solutions that I've been working on are all associated with giving the right tools to the founders such that we plug all the holes possible. There are some obvious holes that are seen. And if we're nice to them, if we just want to be nice to them, they get out with these holes, or we torment them until those holes are filled in. It's good for the founder too. It provides, purity of thought. This idea of 50% is going to fail completely, hopefully there's a Facebook in there, is a defeatist, miserable attitude in my opinion. It just poisons, the purity of the entrepreneur. So we need to do whatever we can collectively, both founders and investors, to not accept this kind of failure rate and to stop it before we invest. I won't get into this one. Okay. So now I'm going to get into the philosophy of this a little bit, if you permit me, because we have to have the intellectual foundation. If we don't have the intellectual foundation and jump straight into the logistics and the technical things, it will be a very weak foundation for us. So this is the question that I ask you. Universities have been teaching biology and creating fantastic biologists, and teaching chemistry and creating fantastic chemists. Now we say, should we make entrepreneurship a legitimate academic discipline where we could teach entrepreneurship as if we were teaching chemistry so that we can create great entrepreneurs? Question number 1, is this within the role of a university? Is it consistent with the historical role of a university? So that's being debated in circles. Question number 2, a PhD, a professor of biology, has studied biology and understands biology and 100% is fully qualified to teach biology. Entrepreneurship is a very weird animal. I don't know of any PhDs in entrepreneurship who have created successful enterprises. If you do, let me know. But we have lots of young people who have created, fantastic entrepreneurial enterprises. So this is a weird situation where academia and practitioners have to work together, have to accept that in this particular case, there is a need for practitioners to work with the academicians if we want to make it a discipline, a robust discipline. It's a fantastic thought, actually. I mean, if we could teach, imagine, entrepreneurship becoming a legitimate academic discipline that we could teach applying the rigor of a university. We don't let you go out with a Mickey Mouse PhD dissertation. If we don't let you go out with a Mickey Mouse business plan and apply all our rigor to your business plan, perhaps we could change the numbers. Yes, ma'am.
On your original graph, though, you were
Which
stating
one?
that the one that had all
The funnel,
not the funnel, speaking of,
the countries,
the
this one?
that, well, yes, the countries.
yeah.
Most of the entrepreneurs are on that lower end, and I don't see as many of those people in universities.
Correct, correct.
So it's like a discrepancy.
Understood. So the question is the following. We have the luxury of having technologies that require the skill sets of the people who were able to execute under extremely difficult circumstances the power of entrepreneurship. In other words, I heard somebody once say, if Bill Gates had been born in a small village in India, he might have been a great seller of mangoes, but there wasn't other opportunities for him to execute, right? It's probably true. And so, we now can deploy technology along with entrepreneurial thinking, let's call it. These folks are
So you
applying
derive the
entrepreneurial thinking.
from them and teach it to.
Not necessarily. I mean, we understand what they know. The ability to read a customer, the ability for compassion, the ability to empathize, the ability to motivate, to drive, because if you don't have all of these things, children are going to go hungry in that case, right? So the ability to negotiate and all of these traits that we know exist. But the danger is, again, this is not necessarily my thought, but that in a university environment we're creating deep knowledge about one topic and not the broader exposure. And that's partly what we might be doing in order to help these the success rate.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so right, so this is a fantastic challenge actually, and that's the reason why I'm here at Washington University. The challenge is what attracted me to here. So what they said to me was, Washington University is a fantastic research university and everybody accepts it. Washington University is a fantastic teaching university, no question about it. Now, Mr. Toker, we want you to make Washington University globally recognized as an entrepreneurial university also. What a fantastic challenge, right? So being a sucker for challenges, I left Arizona where I was for the last 20 years and here I am. I think it's a great challenge. I want to dwell on this just a little bit. This is an interesting statistic for you. Only 85 institutions in the world have survived since 1522. Only 85. Catholic Church, British Parliament, among those. 70 of the 85 are universities. So universities are not a place that you do, short-term experiments and, let's try this and see if it works and so on. Universities are about, continuity, rigor, tradition, and so on and so forth. So this task, this challenge that I took on is really a big challenge, and I want to do everything that I do very, very carefully. Controlled experiments. You don't want to you don't want to try willy-nilly experiments in a university environment. So, I'm with the Scandler Center. We are here to assist. This is a discussion that we've been having. We are here primarily for our students. We are also here to assist the community under these two following conditions. One, that there is something that Washington University can do that is not duplicated by other available resources in the public, in the community. So it has to be a unique thing that only we can do. Then we will step up to the plate and deliver that service to the community. Number two, anything that the community asks from Scandilari Center, I can't speak for Washington University, must be not only good for the person asking from the community, but must also demonstrate some benefit and some value to our students. Which is rather vague. So Steve Jobs said it's all about connecting dots. The more dots you can connect, the more of a human being you'll be, and success will follow automatically. So our students are generally in a nice little bubble, and if they can leave the bubble, touch other places that they would not have touched before, we will have done a service to our students, and we will also benefit the community at the same time. So our primary focus is focus, but also for the community in this sense. The second thing is, there's lots of classes offered, courses offered. Scandularis will specialize itself in experiential training, a training of reality-based operation, coupled with the academic work, but the academic work is supplementary to us, and we're supplementary to the academic work. And an interdisciplinary operation where the archaeology student, the anthropology student, the history student feels equally comfortable coming into the Scandilari Center as does the business student. Because new ideas, new innovations come from everywhere and not just from the business school. So, this may be a small repetition. Now, this is, again, all could be summarized in one word, that tormenting word. This is a series of, I know that some of you will send me emails now and you will say, I have an idea, what do you think? And what I will do is send you back a homework assignment right away, something that you can do. So this is a process of who's got the determination, the skills, the competence, and the stick-to-itness to go down this funnel all the way to the end. And we will send you, if you do not understand the terminology, we'll send you to resources to understand the terminology. If you don't understand the numbers, we'll take you through the numbers. This series of workshops is designed such that we will take you through the entire funnel if you have the time and the interest to invest that amount of time to be taken through the funnel through a single source, which would be me, taking you through all these steps in a very realistic, no-nonsense, hopefully, manner. So this is the structure. And what are we trying to avoid? So in medicine, we have this terminology called false positives and false negatives. A false positive is where we say, you have cancer, but actually you don't have cancer. And a false negative is we say you don't have cancer and they turn out to have cancer. This is the terminology. In our case, for businesses, a false positive is where we say, you're a great company, we'll invest in you. Not just money, but time and resources and so on. Or we'll say, you seem like a great entrepreneur, potential for being a great entrepreneur, we'll invest time and resources on you, and nothing comes out. What did we do? We wasted limited resources. On the other side is, there's so few great ideas and great people, great entrepreneurs, that we can't afford to miss them, and those would have been our false negatives. Now, sorry, we're not going to spend any time with you, but you would have been a great entrepreneur. So these balances between reducing false positives, reducing false negatives, and this idea of not discouraging, but facing reality are the type of pressures that we will apply on you during this process. So this is a student of mine, and she sent me this picture because I had this saying from a person who wrote a book called The Little Prince. So I'll give you a second to read it. So the idea is, well, it's obvious, right? If I wanted to build a ship, I would say, you bring the lumber, you're gonna cut the lumber, you're gonna get the sail, and then, you know, okay, did you do your work, etc. And then the other option is to say, look at this ocean, see how big it is? And just make you fall in love with the ocean, and you'll organize yourselves and build a ship anyway. So in terms of exciting people to get into entrepreneurship, which to me is interdisciplinary by its nature, and the desire to learn about lots of things at the same time, is actually fairly easy to do. The issue is, some people, rightfully so, say, I want to take a very deep dive into my area of research. And I'm not interested in your big ocean, and I'm not interested in learning other things about other disciplines. I want to be fantastic at my own discipline. So this is fine. Unfortunately, in ancient Greece, for instance, superb experts in a discipline loved talking to superb experts in other disciplines. Now we're kind of, you know, take a deep dive and don't bother me, please. But sparks occur when a musician talks to an engineer, when a doctor talks to a historian. For example, let's take a historian. I'd love to have historians on my startup. Why? Because historians, good historians, they understand strategy. If you want to fight GE Medical Systems, you better have someone who understands strategy deeply. Not just superficially, but deeply. So any of you here who feels like, I'm not from business, I'm studying history, you're welcome. Come on in, right? And you can contribute and be extremely successful. Just a couple more words about this mentoring and tormenting. So I consider myself now an educator. And this is a gift that my students gave me, which was the best gift that I ever received. And these were the comments associated with that gift that they wrote on it. So this person went and got a job. So she did not start a company. But she said, I feel capable of starting my venture one day. And I felt challenged and motivated to think harder and smarter, and this will travel with me for the rest of my life. So this to me was the definition of success as an educator, right? So went and got a job, but did not get discouraged, feels that she can start a company anytime that she wants to. So this will be my objective for this series of workshops that hopefully everybody in this group will also say, I now feel that I do have the tools to start a company if I want to. I don't have to, but I could. I'll skip over these, skip over this. So, I'm a relatively old person, and the older we get, the more we start thinking about, so what did I really do? What did I really contribute? But I'm really pleasantly surprised that students are already thinking about this at a much younger age. What I mean by that is you'll hear this concept of the business model. And the very crude definition of the business model is, how are you going to make money? Right? That's kind of what you might hear. The standard definition would be, how do you create value, how do you deliver the value, and how do you extract value? Let me tell you what I mean by that. So a scientist sitting in a lab can create value, but if that value is not delivered to somebody, then we did not have impact. And that happens a lot of the time. So we create the value, we deliver the value. Extraction of the value, in a crude sense, means profit. We'll extract as much value as we possibly can. And now what I'm pleasantly hearing more and more is, the extraction of the value is to enable the creation of more value. So Mark Zuckerberg, even Mark Zuckerberg, I guess I should say, has said, we don't build services to make money, we make money to build better services. And that, I personally realized at a late stage in my life, but you guys are realizing it much earlier than me, which is very pleasant. So, maybe some of you are saying, well, this is now gone, way off of the workshop and getting, extra philosophical. But we need to cover just a few more things. We need to set ourselves a bar. And the bar, in my opinion, is Stanford University. So you can see the numbers for yourselves. Stanford University has created 18,000 new companies, 30,000 nonprofit organizations. 18,000 companies are now generating $1.27 trillion in revenue, and 39% of those companies are within 60 miles of Stanford University. Imagine us being able to do something similar to this at Washington University. Imagine the impact it would have in the local environment and the university, the country, the globe, everywhere that you can think of. And 30 years ago, there was no entrepreneurship school or courses at Stanford University, so they're not that far ahead. They are definitely the bar for us to consider. And it's interesting that it's not all about creating for-profit firms. The outcome of understanding entrepreneurship is also the formation of nonprofit organizations also. I'm going to end the philosophical part of the discussion with this slide. So to my students, I used to say that I'm here to prepare you for real life. And entrepreneurship happens to be a great tool for me to use to prepare you for real life. What does preparation for real life mean? It means finding out your own limits as a person in a multidimensional way, meaning, you're great analytically, you're supremely intelligent analytically, fine. Show me how good you are in creative intelligence, social intelligence, practical intelligence. Do you have those? And the only place that I know of where you test yourself as a human being as to what your limits are is through entrepreneurship. And you not only figure out what your limits are, but then you see how close you will get to your limits. Again, multidimensional. Entrepreneurship is a fantastic area to put this to the test, to understand yourself, to exceed, to push beyond your limits. So, in that sense too, I recommend entrepreneurship to you as a means of discovering who you are and who you can potentially become. Okay? So that concludes the parts about who am I and why is this important and so on. So, at this point, I'm going to ask you to drive the rest of this particular workshop, but first I need to ask, when does this end? 5:30, okay. In that case, let's do a show of hands. I can do one of two things for the rest of this workshop. We can go through this with one or more of you to assess ideas, but more importantly to understand this structure. Or I can build this up for you from scratch, from zero, all the way out to here. I am not sure if we would have enough time to do that, so my vote is going to be for exercising the simpler project. Anyone opposing? Hearing none, we moved on. Okay? All right, so can I have a volunteer? Come on up. So what's your name?
Dan White.
Dan White? Dan? So tell the class what your idea is first.
So my idea is to create a delicious all-natural breakfast burrito that my target audience, I believe, would be students like yourself and young professionals, office buildings, incubators, hospitals. And my end goal is to have a 1-year shelf life with all-natural preservatives and have it in grocery stores across the country. So at some point scale up and outsource co-packing and find a distributor. To get started, I'd like to get a simple kiosk and hit the different vending districts on the streets, and then try to kind of evolve into office deliveries with 10 orders or more to office buildings and incubators.
so now we're going to ask you a series of questions. You'll give us an answer, and then you'll defend your answer, and I may push you a little bit on your answer. So the first question is, are you trying to solve a customer pain? Does the customer desperately seeking for the delicious, nutritious burrito and can't find it? Or are you seeing this as an opportunity? Before you answer, the options you're given are extreme pain, moderate pain, not much pain involved, hardly any pain at all, mostly a market opportunity. What would be your choice?
Hardly any pain at all, mostly
Market opportunity. Okay, so let's pause here and talk a little bit. It depends on what our objective is, right? So there's no question that the more we can demonstrate a customer pain, the more likely that our venture is going to be successful. The standard answers that we get against this is that, well, nobody really needed the iPod, but it became very successful. Nobody really needed Facebook, but it became really successful. But in essence, if we tear it up and look at the essence of things, Facebook did solve a customer pain, a pain of connection, for example. An iPod may have created some desire by, the pain was, everybody has this but me, Dad, and the dad says, you pain in the, so that type of pain can be created. So talk to us a little bit about why customer pain is not so critical to the success of your venture, or you don't care.
So the customer pain is skipping breakfast, and some people can do fine, I guess, without skipping breakfast. But for me personally, when I have my breakfast, it's like a whole different day. And they say that breakfast is the most important meal. So.
So you're pretty much, at the moment, extrapolating from your personal experiences to a wider audience. So let's ask you the second question. So the second question is a loaded question, right? We're going to ask him about how many people can he service in 5 years. What we're testing is does he have in mind, a single restaurant in St. Louis next to Wash U? Is he envisioning a franchise like Starbucks all over the world, just in the US? So the number of customers that you think you'll be able to serve 5 years down the line, what's your vision of your company? And the answers are millions and millions, hundreds of thousands, or will always be a small niche.
I say hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands. Now, describe this. What do you envision a franchising system, all corporately owned restaurants, or what?
So
The geographical expansion in 5 years that you're envisioning.
Would start with people who shop at Whole Foods and other all-natural stores, even Deerbirds and
So it's not a restaurant, it's just a process.
It's just,
Okay.
the end result would be a frozen product with a shelf life of a year that would give me an opportunity to distribute it long distances
Okay.
and have it on the shelves of
Okay.
groceries.
So all U.S. market specialty stores, or could I get it at Schnucks in 5 years, or is it just going to be?
Growth. That's a growth.
Okay. So we would squeeze you pretty hard as you went down the line as to exactly how far do you want to take this, how far could it be taken? That it's available at 7-Eleven, Circle K, whatever you have here in St. Louis, or just high-end, low-end, et cetera, et cetera.
I think high middle.
High-end, okay? Your solutions, price, performance, compared to the alternatives already available to your potential customers today. Performance in this case would be, I guess, healthy and delicious. Infinitely better, far better, about the same.
Better.
And do you have the expertise to make a better product than everybody else can, or would you have to find that expertise from elsewhere?
I would have to
Find it
part
elsewhere.
that
Okay. Is it possible to produce your product or service at a competitive cost so that you can build a sustainable venture? Again, a loaded question. So what I know is that profit margins in the food business is quite low. So are you going to have enough margin, enough profit, that you can absorb some mistakes that you'll make and all the overhead that you're going to have, and so on and so forth?
I anticipate a 70% margin. I don't know how realistic that is until I put it in action.
Okay, so you don't even have to put it in action. All you gotta do is look at other companies and look at what their profit margin was. And I can tell you that very, very few food-based companies can make 70% margin. Unless if you had, super, super premium product that was priced extremely high, much higher than alternatives. So,
The 70% represents selling it directly to the customers and not having the grocery stores involved at all. But once you go to the grocery stores, it's a different product because it has preservatives and shelf life inside.
okay,
So then the margins are very similar.
okay. Okay, so I'm gonna say cost per permits, high profits for now, but I push back on this a bit. Now, why is this an important question? Can your venture one day become a large global enterprise with many lines of products centered around a core competency? Why are we interested in you having the potential to build a large company as opposed to just, a tiny one?
I want to build it around breakfast, the idea of breakfast. And so I would like a lineup of breakfast burritos, vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, and then a couple others that aren't as healthy. So all about breakfast, so maybe different breakfast items.
Okay, so you're going to establish a core competency, something that you do better than anybody else in the world will be what? Your understanding of customers' tastes for breakfast, or what? What will you know that nobody else knows?
Well, I hope that like a competitive advantage.
Core competency. What will you be fantastic at? I
Marketing.
know this topic better than anybody else in the world. So I could say, I know mammography devices better than anybody else in the world. What would you say?
I would hope marketing and branding.
Okay,
We can
you will market it and brand it, and that will be your core competency, your core strength that you have, that you bring to your team, brings to the table. Okay. So this is a tough one, I think, but maybe you'll answer differently. How easy, I don't know, how easy will it, sorry. How easy would it be for other knowledgeable people or companies to copy your venture concept, particularly if you start showing some success in the market?
what are my options?
Your options are, don't know, extremely difficult, relatively easy, extremely easy.
I would say that we would have our own signature, kind of humorous marketing and branding. I think that would be hard to copy. But as far as the product goes, they could probably do reverse
Yeah.
engineering to figure out what we make.
Yeah.
Probably make it.
And, humorous branding they could do too. There's lots of talented people out there, right?
So I'd say they're
Relatively easy, yeah. So one of the things that hopefully you're observing is, and this is, completely human nature, right? First of all, I need to applaud him for having the courage to come up here and, to expose his idea and himself to criticism and so on and so forth. But everybody, including, as I keep picking on the tenured professors, even the tenured professors cannot be, by nature, completely objective about this. They feel like, they have to defend the process. That's why you need to find yourself a devil's advocate who will, keep asking the tough questions to you. How many other companies are there out there that already provide a viable alternative to the solution you're proposing? And the answers are only a few startups, a few established companies, none, many.
There are two companies that do all natural burritos with a few different breakfast burrito options, Amy's and Evil. As far as other options for breakfast, I think power bars people bring to work.
So again, we're saying viable alternative. Are these companies that do the burritos, are they startups or are they established companies?
They're established.
Established companies. So in this case, the best answer that we want to hear, by the way, is not none, because none is a yellow flag, right? If nobody else is doing it, there must be a reason. There must be no money in it. So only a few startups would have been an answer that we would have liked to have heard. Why is this important? Is there a reason for your customers and yourself to be passionate about your venture concept?
Yes.
And why is that?
The reason to be passionate about it is because so many people miss breakfast. It's important to have breakfast. And not only that, but it's important to have ingredients that are sourced locally from farmers with sustainable farming practices and that are good for your body. And there's a movement towards organic farming practices.
Okay. So this is a valid answer. So the options were everybody should be passionate about this. It's that important. Everybody, okay. How easy will it be to put together a team of experts to design and build your innovation? Don't know, very easy, somewhat difficult, very difficult. Somewhat difficult. How easy will it be to demonstrate a simulation of your concept before you actually build it? So what I mean here is, this is something you all should think about. The first question that we want an answer to is, show me some evidence that if you build it, they will buy. Don't start building it. Show me some evidence that if you build it, they will buy. So can you do this in your kitchen and, you know, go to some like the food festival or something like that, and you sold, there was a line of, 80 people in front of your booth at all times? That's an indication that if you build it, they may buy. How easy would it be for you to prove that if I build it, they will buy? Don't know, very easy, somewhat difficult, very difficult. Okay?
This is a separate question.
Oh,
Yeah, another separate question.
I'm sorry, so this one was somewhat difficult, and this one was, I don't know. Okay. Can you think of, this may not be so applicable to you, but can you think of any initial arm's length customers, meaning not your mom, not your aunt, who may be likely to buy early on before your full product or service is complete? In other words, have you talked to some Whole Foods and so on, and they said, wow, we're really missing this in our portfolio of products. As soon as you get it, come back and talk to us and so on. So the answers are, don't know, definitely, can name them now, probably, possibly, not yet. Probably, okay. Are there any established companies who might see a benefit in partnering with you on your venture concept? So this would be called a channel partner to allow you to get to the market a little bit quicker. And the answer is what? Definitely can name them now, probably, possibly, no.
Definitely can name them now.
Okay. This is also not probably applicable to you, but it's a big consideration. Free money is always good. Are there any government grant funding possibilities for your venture concept? Don't know. I've already identified which government agencies have solicitations to fund such a project. Yes, this project concept seems appropriate for government grants. There may be some small funding available. I don't think the government would fund such a concept.
There may be some small.
Okay. How likely is it for your company to be an acquisition merger target of a larger, more established company within the next 5 years? Don't know. I have already identified several larger companies who have acquired startups similar to mine. There are probably larger companies who might be interested. I know of no larger firms that might consider acquiring my startup. It seems very unlikely that my startup would be acquired, would be an acquisition target.
The first one I'm sorry, the second one I have already.
Okay? They acquired companies. So, you get a 46%. By itself, it doesn't mean anything at all. And now I would have to get into a discussion with you, and absolutely I would now pull from my database frame of the 5, 6 dozen companies that have attempted to do what you're doing in some different ways. For example, I know the cost of goods sold, the routes to Whole Foods and so on. Whole Foods will do a consignment, will say, give me the product, when I sell it, I pay you. So there's some cash flow issues and so on and so forth. So we together try to decide how much of your time should you invest in this as a very smart person and an entrepreneur, or or can you think of something else that might have better use of your skills and your experience and so on and so forth. So hopefully you were all running something similar in your mind as we were going down this. These are really acid test questions that every startup should ask themselves. Yes, sir.
So after doing this, will you be open to like for us to come to you and like will you actually get one-on-one time to talk about it?
So the answer is yes, especially now because I'm so new. But I'm pretty sure the university didn't hire me to do that, so I'll do it for as long as I can get away with it. But I'm supposed to like manage a center and so on. So I'm, very quickly trying to get to know people in the community who have a similar, no-nonsense, the combination of characteristics that I'm looking for are, one, I've bled over my startup and I know how tough it is to build a startup. It's not like, I got $20 million from VC and I bought myself a mahogany chair and I founded a company. No, that doesn't qualify as far as I'm concerned. Frankly, I was telling my colleagues, this is a bit crude, but my acid test is when somebody says, I started a company, I say, did you clean the toilets or did you hire somebody to clean the toilets? If you clean the toilets yourself, you're my kind of entrepreneur and I want you. So that's number one. Number two, the ability to teach. Number three, the willingness to teach. Because very successful entrepreneurs already have an incredibly comfortable life, lots of things.